Good morning, folks. I'm sorry you guys are getting this so late today. I recorded it last night, trying to post on YouTube, and that did not work. I'm going to try that again through a different software system. But we only have about 15 minutes left, a little bit less than 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to get through this quickly. Okay, so I want to go over the answers to the rhetorical situation practice y'all did, which you're going to do again today with a different article. Okay, so first, context. The problem that you guys dealt with, and this is all in this document, which I'm going to post, you guys can see over here on Google Classroom today. The problem was you guys looked just at what was happening the immediate time and place before the article. So obviously Kobe Bryant, a major celebrity, both sports-wise and a cultural icon, passed away tragically and totally surprisingly, shockingly. What we missed was the bigger picture of what was happening around the time and place, and that is pointed out in the article. If we get all the way down towards the end here, there was no way to work that night in the Colorado hotel into the biography that unspooled thereafter and came to such a sudden end on Sunday. In the Massachusetts for decades, political writers wrestled with where to place Chappaquiddick into the saga of Ted Kennedy, and to many of them. Too many of them gave up and erased the event in Mary Jo Kopachin. But it is 2020 now, and Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and Harvey Weinstein is in a New York courtroom, and erasing a female victim is no longer a viable and moral, ethical strategy. Kobe Bryant died on Sunday with one of those young women in his life. Okay, so what we care about are these sentences here in this beginning clause. So, Ted Kennedy, the former senator, he was driving back from the Kennedy estate in Chappaquiddick, and he drove off of a cliff with a woman in his car who was not his wife, and he managed to escape, and she drowned. The car sank, she drowned. And people still, like when he passed away in the last couple years, people mentioned it a little bit, but people raved about his war veteran record. People raved about his presence in the Senate. Her name just didn't come up that much, and I imagine it came up more then than it had when it first happened. But he's pointing out that that isn't how the world works anymore. So nowadays, we have people who have had long-standing records of sexual abuse that people either overlooked, ignored, felt powerless to do anything about, but now they actually feel like they can say something and speak up. So he's referencing the Me Too movement and how the Me Too movement has empowered women and really anyone who's been sexually assaulted, abused, or sort of suffered any form of oppression like that, to be able to have a voice and to be able to express themselves. There's also a second layer to that Jeffrey Epstein, by committing suicide perhaps, there's a lot of conspiracy saying that he was murdered, and the footage in his cell is bizarrely missing during that time period. But he didn't really suffer legal consequences for it. He was arrested, but he never actually went through the trial process. So a lot of the victims, a lot of people were upset because they never got their day in court. They never feel vindicated. So in some ways, he didn't suffer any significant punishment. Same thing. We know that Harvey Weinstein actually will be found guilty. But at this point, we still don't know if he's going to get off or not. So referencing the Me Too movement, and we're still in a place when this is written, when we don't know if people who have committed these crimes, who have done these terrible actions, will actually have to suffer any significant consequences, or have to recognize or be found culpable for those actions. And so again, that's our context, is not just the death of Kobe Bryant, but also that we're in a time and a place where we're trying to hold people responsible for the actions they've done, particularly actions of a sexual nature, but we're still not sure if culturally or legally if we can't have a way to do that, but we want to. And so we're on the fence between those two things. Okay, all that again is explained here in actually written words. Okay, the writer, the reader, the speaker. Some people still just gave me the name. A few people actually gave me the beliefs, and that's what I want to stress. When we're reading through this, we want to try to see, what does the person believe in? What does the person value? That's going to tell us what kind of problems they identify, why this exigence fits for them, and it's also going to help us understand their purpose. So I picked this answer from one of y'all's. And let's go over it. He went from an arrogant teenager to a great eminence in the league to one of the NBA's most prominent sports parents. By saying this, the writer shares his belief in people making mistakes and their ability to learn from those mistakes and to grow and become better versions of themselves through changed attitude and mindsets. Okay, awesome. So this student is identifying that one of the values and beliefs he identifies is that people can grow up, people can learn. People, I guess a couple people can grow up, people can learn from mistakes, they can become better people. We could identify many of those. Even looking at this quote, he clearly identifies being he values being a successful athlete. He values being a parent. He values someone working hard and gaining celebrity status through achievements. And we see from this paragraph down here again that he does value being moral. He does value being ethical. He does value not just keeping up with the trends, but knowing that things have changed. I don't get the feeling change, but he knows that however he used to think isn't the way to think anymore, and he's okay accepting that. Okay, moving on to the exigence. So what happens to compel the writer to write? And the problem was that you guys did identify the primary exigence, which is Kobe Bryant has died. And now we need to write things to commemorate him, to memorialize him. And this is an obituary. We'll get to the genre in a second. Again, we want to think, so a lot of people could have written an obituary. A lot of people could have written some sort of memorial article. What is the problem that is inspiring Charles Pierce to write this? What problem is this particular essay addressing within that exigence of Kobe Bryant's death? And again, I picked out an answer over here. To watch Bryant at his peak and his prime was appreciate the terrible irony that he died in a fall from the sky. His life was also marked by one terrible episode in which he was accused of rape by a 19-year-old hotel worker in Colorado. Kobe Bryant died in a tragic and sudden accident, and conflict arises about celebrating someone who made a grievous error in life. Some people only see his positives, and some people only think about his sexual assault. So the exigence this person is trying to address is that people don't know how to see Kobe Bryant at this point. They don't know how to balance out his achievements plus his potential maliciousness. They don't understand how to both honor him and how to be truthful and honest about him. And so now he is dead. We have to do those things. We have to somehow commemorate and understand his legacy, understand his story. But that gets difficult because of these two different events. Because that he was in his prime, he was in his peak, he was an amazing athlete, but there's also this significant chink in his armor. So again, he died. We need to commemorate him, but we're struggling to understand how to commemorate him. And that's what this article addresses. Okay, audience. Some people still said everyone, even though the directions explicitly said don't do that. Make sure you are reading the directions. And then some people only looked at one aspect of the obituary, so I picked this answer out, and I will tell you the sentence I added. How you will come to measure his life has to be judged by how deeply you believe that he corrected his grievous fault through the life you lived afterwards. This piece is intended for those that may still want to indirectly attack Bryant even after his death. These people may still judge Bryant for the incident in Colorado without choosing to view his life as a whole rather than one moment. And then that's a student, and I added this in. The piece is also intended for those who want to think positively about his basketball record and want to ignore his potential crimes. And the reason I added that was because, again, when the end talks about how you will come to measure his life, depends on how well you think he corrected his mistakes. So I do think the author has a preference, and I think that's what this student is alluding to. But I think the author is still leaving it open. I think he's recognizing that some people are only going to see these statistics and they're going to forget about this moment. Or some people are only going to see about this moment and they're going to forget that he did become a wonderful and caring father. And what this guy is doing is pointing out that we have to somehow balance those two. He's not telling us which one we have to deal with, but he's telling us that we have to understand that both of those pieces need to fit together. And the message, you guys did pretty well with the message. We'll get through this real quickly. One thing people did miss was the conflict in the obituary, which I just referred to. That some people might want to only see his athletic achievement and his career achievement. Some people might only want to see the sexual assault case. He went from an arrogant teenager to a great eminence in the league to one of NBA's most prominent sport parents, a relatively recent phenomenon, consistently showing up at a game with one of his 3 daughters. His 4th Capri was born only 6 months ago and will never know him, and that's the most heartbreaking part of his death. There was no way to work that night in Colorado hotel into the biography that unspooled thereafter and came to such a sudden end on Sunday. Pierce clearly respects and admires Bryant's accomplishments, but more importantly, he lionizes Bryant's growth. At the same time, he recognizes that being guilty of anything as despicable as sexual assault could undermine all other successes in a person's life. So that's his general message. Notice I'm not telling us what he wants his reader to do. I'm not talking about the audience. I'm literally just trying to summarize the plot, the content of the essay. Okay, purpose. What does the writer want to accomplish? Had a great student response on here, so we're just going to cut straight to that. Again, so purpose, let's see, what does the writer want to accomplish? And I'll add some notes to this with the audience. So to answer the purpose question correctly, you must be talking about the audience. What is the impact on the audience, or the ideal impact on the audience? And I make a little note over here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. Not Unified Classroom, Google Classroom. But to get purpose, you want to look at the beginning and the end. So I can look at the beginning, and I can see that he's talking about people that make mistakes and people that are still successful even with those mistakes. And we're talking about making mistakes. We're talking about correcting mistakes. So that's going to be part of the purpose, is thinking about how people correct mistakes and getting us, the reader, to think about what mistakes people make and how they can be corrected if they can be corrected. And then I'm going to come down to the end, which this person references. So the student Kobe Bryant died on Sunday with one of the young women in his life, and how you'll come to measure his life has to be judged by how deeply you believe that he corrected his grievous faults to the life he lived afterwards, and how deeply you believe that he corrected that fault immediately and beautifully in midair. People want to think about these questions. Did Kobe Bryant correct his fault? Did he deserve death? He first told people about the incident, followed by his many accomplishments, in order to give the reader a sense that his mistakes were left in the past. This leaves the reader wondering if Kobe was able to redeem himself. So 2 things I love about this answer. First, the person captures the piece's ambiguity and confusion by stating that with questions. So that's the basic question. Did he correct his faults? And then this student also points out that the piece, because of its structure, does seem to believe that he did balance out his life. He did do enough to make up for that mistake. The author doesn't tell us that explicitly, but that does seem to be his general message. And so we could say that part of the purpose too is he's trying to push us to be more accepting of Kobe. Even though he's giving us a choice, his undertone is that with that choice, we should recognize that Kobe did do enough. Okay, and the genre, I'm going to see if I can find a list of good genre terms for us. We would qualify this as an obituary. An obituary is something written about a person after they're dead, to commemorate that person, to memorialize that person, to talk about that person's life, what they've done, what they accomplished to survive that person, etc. It's a little bit like a eulogy, except it's written and published, usually in a newspaper of sorts. Okay, that is about it. We got through that pretty quickly. Let me know if you have any questions, and then you're doing the same thing again tonight. Make sure your goal is you are getting better. Take a look at your answers from last night. Look at what we've talked about. Watch this video, and think about what did you not do well, what did you do well, what do you want to keep doing, and what do you want to do differently this time. Our goal every time we do something is we've got to get better, we got to get better, we got to get better. And again, this is super, super, super important. I don't know if I said this. Super important that the readers, I have 3 seconds left.